So what exactly is the issue with Arsenal? Here in France, we just assume that everyone in England's enamored with the storied team of Arsène Wenger, Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira, and all the other greats all the way to the present and French international defender William Saliba. Ahead of Arsenal versus Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League final, our panel delves into the not always rational, always passionate world of football fandom. So, regarding the side that's just won its first Premier League title in 22 years, is it about the way they play, their attitude, an anti-London sentiment, an anti-North London sentiment? Contrast that with the love the Gunners get here in France and in much of Africa. Likewise, donning a PSG jersey will earn you compliments on several continents, but panelists may advise against doing so in Marseille and a host of other points across France. Old domestic grudges are hard to overcome, even when a side is defending a European title, even when its Qatari owners booted out hooligans a decade ago, and today have streamlined big egos in the dressing room in favor of an exciting brand of fast-paced, teamwork-oriented play. Perhaps what lovers and haters of both Arsenal and PSG can agree on is that at least Saturday's final between those two big city sides might possibly serve up that key ingredient that could lack when the FIFA World Cup kicks off in exactly 2 weeks in North America. That is authenticity. Is the beautiful game bigger than the toxic build-up to any one tournament? Or will the bloated 48-team, price surge, travel ban threatened World Cup be a game changer for football? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking, where's the love for Arsenal among English fans? With us, we're joined by three sports reporters who are totally impartial. Tando Sebia will be joining us shortly. She is on the way. Andreas Evagora is with us as well. You'll be covering the World Cup. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Ruben Slachter, co-author of Football Investigation, Everything You Need to Know About Football in Russia, is with us as well. You're from across the street at Eurosport there. Yeah. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
And joining us from London, Anu Adedoye, reporter for the Financial Times. Good to see you, Anu.
Thank you, Francois. Good to see you.
On the go, you can listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. There was certainly pride on display in the Bronx on Wednesday as New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani showed up for Eid prayers sporting an Arsenal thobe, a show of pride in a side with a global following. Of course, back in Blighty, the argument rages. We can show you the latest from the Daily Telegraph's senior sports writer, Tom Gibbs, who wonders if now, quote, decades of resentment over unbearable superiority and jarring celebrity fans threaten to give way to an upturn of goodwill. One magnet of intense dislike, it seems, is longtime Arsenal player turned manager Mikel Arteta, the Spaniard who's trying to crowd out the noise as his side goes for the double.
Now we need to go through the motions and do what we've done all season, which is win football matches. We win one more and we are the champions of Europe. As simple as that, and the rest will come.
Now in The Guardian, Barney Ronay writing the following regarding Arteta, saying Arteta has talked about being on fire and getting on the fun boat, which still conjures an image of really terrible booze cruise with a bunch of corporate surveyors. Andres Evagora, what football team is it that you support?
I've supported Arsenal since the mid-70s. I first went to a game when I was 6 years old, back in the mid-70s, supported them ever since. I was born and brought up within a few miles of Highbury, the old ground, and supported them ever since. Interesting, very good intro. I do like it, I must say. Are Arsenal hated? Yes. There's nothing particularly new about it. When I was growing up, the headlines were regularly boring Arsenal, lucky Arsenal. There was a period when Arsène Wenger made the club more popular because they were playing great football and not really spending much money. But since then, you can't really read an article without, Arsenal dark arts coming out. Arsenal apparently invented cheating. People don't like Arsenal because they're the biggest team in London, so that's understandable as well. The style of football is grating. I mean, it's a horrible style of football to watch. I'm the first to admit that. But Arsenal just needed to get over the line. this time after 22 years. It should be said that we actually liked being hated. I mean, I think that's one thing missing from your intro. The first song that Arsenal fans were singing, I had some friends who were at Selhurst Park at the weekend, "We Are Unbearable." You know, we like the fact that we are disliked. We like the fact that people, I think there's some jealousy. You know, when Arsenal won, when the title was clinched after Bournemouth got that draw, there were 150,000 people in the streets at 2:00 in the morning on a Tuesday. I don't think many other teams in England could get that kind of crowd out. So there's a bit of jealousy in there. And I definitely ignore the fact-free Daily Telegraph about, you know, famous fans. Every club has got famous fans. Come on. So that we can put to one side. There's a whole load of reasons. I think Arsenal are definitely disliked in England, the UK. But as you've said, overseas, a lot of fans.
All right, I'm going to corroborate what you say with a quote from a famous fan. Celebs who support Arsenal include, of course, the UK Prime Minister himself. Keir Starmer is not alone, as pointed out by celebrity journalist and superfan Piers Morgan, writing in The Spectator. Morgan taking kind of an ironic tone. He said, "It's hard to understand why a club that boasts a fan base that includes us, Jeremy Corbyn, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, the late Osama bin Laden, and Prince Harry attracts such opprobrium that we were recently named the most hated supporters in the league." Anu, I know you're also a Gunners fan. You enjoy the hate?
I do, actually. You know, I think as someone who grew up in Nigeria, I became an Arsenal fan because we had Kanu playing for Arsenal, right? And, you know, at the time under Arsène Wenger, we played incredible football, but Arsenal was always seen as this team that was brittle, that didn't have spine. And what Arteta has brought in is, you know, made Arsenal physically stronger. And for some reason, that's a sin, right? You know, Arsenal are very good at set pieces, which is, last I checked, one of the most important aspects of the game, right? You know, if you look at the trajectory of football, right, you know, it's become more physical, it's become more reliant on set pieces. You know, whether Arsenal were the harbingers of that or whether we're just following the trend, you know, that's for other people to decide. But it's really important that we be really good at this one aspect of the game. And, you know, I find it really interesting that people treat being very, very good, again, that's one of the key aspects of the game, as a sin. And I think, you know, I'm sure we'll get to the Champions League final, but I would love us to win it in the 90th minute with a deflected set piece winner of some sort, right? It would be really beautiful. So yeah, in a nutshell, and you know, I think most Arsenal fans don't really care about whether people like us or not. It's just about, you know, are we winning? And people talk about Arsenal as some sort of dirty team, but we just went an entire Premier League season without getting a red card, right? And without conceding a penalty. Okay, maybe we were lucky with some 50-50 decisions, but that's literally never happened before, right? We were top of the fair play league as well, right? So this is a team, you know, that does things the right way. And when you also look at the way football is going, right? You know, PSG, for example, are majority owned by the state of Qatar. You know, Manchester City, who we compete against, you know, also are, you know, majority owned by Abu Dhabi, right? Fair enough, Arsenal are owned by a US billionaire. But as far as things go, it's very rare for a team that was built brick by brick on the money that the team makes, right, to achieve this type of glory. And I think people always had a lot of fun making fun of Arsenal. You know, we used to have what was called the banter years. You know, this was when we were losing 8-2 to Manchester United. This was when we were losing 6-0 to Chelsea. That's gone now. And ultimately, people don't like that. You know, you can't really think of, you know, this is not the team that you used to make fun of, you know, 10 years ago.
Ruben Slachter, first off, before we go into the reasons why Arsenal's intensely disliked by some in England, is it the same in the Netherlands? You think, do the Dutch feel it as though it's the team of Dennis Bergkamp? Is it the same as here in France, where we think of it as the team of Thierry Henry? Why would anyone dislike Arsenal?
Yeah, but that's often the case, right? When you look at in other countries, they always prefer the big teams, and especially when there's a local connection. And yeah, I'm from the generation of Dennis Bergkamp, so exactly, it's for that reason that many Dutch people prefer Arsenal. It's their favorite team in the UK, often with Manchester United because of Ruud van Nistelrooy as well. So yeah, that's for that reason.
Are you surprised by what you're hearing, that there is this divisiveness surrounding the Gunners?
I'm just having a great laugh because I think that this is just a fantastic debate already, and we just started. So I find it very funny to hear these kind of things because, yeah, I mean, with all the big teams, it's always the same, right? In the Netherlands, everybody is against Ajax. Well, have a look around. If I'm here in Paris, and just before entering here, the question came again: do I support Ajax or Feyenoord? Yeah, I'm both not supporting them. But there's a lot of people when you come here. It's just a consequence of being a big club in general, and then there's extra reasons why people are not fans of a certain club. And I think that the examples or the reasons for Arsenal have just been given by the two real experts.
So Anu was talking about, what's the sort of the quote-unquote Cinderella side and what's the giant, because Arsenal, they've been pointing the finger at rivals like, say, Manchester City, owned by Abu Dhabi, or Newcastle, owned by Saudi investors.
But that's the whole Premier League right now. I mean, if you want to have the fairy tale of the Premier League this year, it's Sunderland and Bournemouth for me. Those two teams, they have also a lot of money, but they managed from underdog positions to do incredible seasons. And all the other clubs, they will be also always seen as money. And how do you say that? It's not as if they are, there's always reasons why you prefer one or the other, but that will always be the case. But in the Premier League, you have 18 teams that are fully...
And 0 penalties against Arsenal all season. Is that incredible skill, incredible luck? Or were referees perhaps a bit...
Zero penalties is a clear sign that you did a very good season. I mean, the problem with Arsenal is that when we talk about Arsenal, and in the Netherlands as well, or even here in France, we like to dream about the Arsenal that everybody fell in love with, the Invincibles. We like to talk about Thierry Henry. We like to talk about Dennis Bergkamp. But the reality is right now that Mikel Arteta managed to build a team that is very, very difficult to beat, because he has, I think, the best two center backs, or at least the pair of it, in the world right now. That he managed that the defense of Arsenal, that they have a very good goalkeeper. Yeah, it is not exciting, but if they win every game, who cares?
Andreas Evagora, let's talk about sort of concentric circles, right? Football is tribal, right? And it's, in French we have this expression, the spirit of the church steeple. You hate the village that's next to you, where you can see the church steeple. And there is this element to it. The rest of London, obviously there are rivalries. The biggest rivalry is with the closest neighbor, Spurs. Yeah. What is this about, though, this anti-Arsenal deluge we've seen in the press over the last couple of weeks? Is it about the Gunners themselves, or is it an anti-London sentiment at a time when, kind of like here in France, the city of London is concentrating all the wealth in the country?
It's certainly both. I mean, there is, I think there's an anti-London feel across the media. I mean, as an example, Ado made a good point. A few years ago, Arsenal, I think we had 4 or 5 red cards, and Arsenal was slaughtered in the press because we had so many red cards. This year, Arsenal haven't got any red cards. What's the result? Arsenal slaughtered for whatever reason, the referees being biased, whatever. So there is an anti-London, as there is in any country. Like in France, there's an anti-capital kind of feeling. Within London, the biggest rivalry is indeed with Tottenham. And we should say Tottenham, I think a lot of people wanted Tottenham to be relegated as well. So that's a sign of,
So the rest of England wanted both North London sides to go down.
There's absolutely
What is it
no
about?
doubt.
Is it because they're sort of bohemian bourgeois? They're too hipster?
Well, it's a capital thing. I think there's a feeling that players want to go to London just because it's London, which is partly true. And people say southern softies, rich Londoners, all that stuff. These are quite common tropes. You've got to remember in England, these don't come from nowhere. These are themes promoted by the media, by television, and certain clubs have certain characters. And, that's Arsenal's character, is playing dirty, being a bit lucky, Arsenal spend money, but let's be clear, Manchester City's wage bill is 3 times Arsenal's, 300%. So Arsenal is not a poor club by any means, but we're not even in the league of Manchester City. So Arnaud's exactly right. I mean, it's a fantastic achievement to be able to compete with Manchester City and beat them, because Arsenal, one thing you didn't mention, Arsenal have come second for the last 3 seasons. And that kicks into it as well, because we were seen as eternal losers, eternal chokers. Everyone was laughing at Arsenal. And now the boot's on the other foot. So that's another reason to dislike Arsenal. But, it's I'm not being paranoid here. I think it would just be the same if any other team was always finishing second, and from London, it would probably be the same.
All right, when Arsenal clinched the title thanks to, I must say, a drab 1-0 win over Burnley, and Manchester City had a clumsy draw against Everton, it wasn't just the UK capital that erupted. We can perhaps show you scenes from Nairobi. The love, there you saw, those are the scenes there in Kenya's capital. Arsenal has a particular love affair, as Anu was saying, with Nigeria. The current squad boasts no fewer than 4 players of Nigerian origin, including, of course, their star striker, Bukayo Saka. Anu, is it fair to say that Arsenal is Africa's team?
Yeah, I would say so. You obviously there's the Premier League is so massive and so global, and there's supporters of pretty much every big team. But I think Arsenal, as I was saying, when I was growing up, Kanu was playing for Arsenal, and because of that, it drove a generation of fans. That's how I became an Arsenal fan. And beyond just Kanu, there was a time under Arsène Wenger, because Arsène Wenger is this international man who was attuned to the fact that there was talents from everywhere in the world, right? And he had players from Ivory Coast, from Cameroon. We had Emmanuel Adebayor from Togo, for example. So we've always had a team that was international, that was diverse. I think in 2002, Arsenal played against Leeds. We won 4-1. And we had a team of 9 black players. 9 of the 10 outfield players were black, right? That never happened in English football before, right? So this was, as a result of having, we had the great Thierry Henry, who is beloved in Africa, by the way, right? So we've always been an international team, a team that's always been, outward looking. And I think that kind of shows in people supporting Arsenal. And also, Arsenal has huge cultural cachet, right? At the time when we weren't particularly good, which was, not that long ago, I always joked that we were a fashion house with a football team attached, right? Because we always had the best kits. We always had, eye-catching, training gear and all of that kind of stuff. So, this is a team that has huge cultural cachet. And I think there's also something very interesting in the fact that when we weren't winning, that was when we attracted loads of fans, right? And I think maybe there's something about not winning that builds up your character. And it made loads of people attracted to Arsenal.
I hope that's the same for Nancy, my team, which is the bottom rung of second division. We stayed in second division this year.
Well
Andreas, let me ask you, you heard Anu saying it's partly about the merch, but there is also another part of this history, which was, there's always been politics running through football. And in the case of Arsenal, it fell to one side of that political divide in the past.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember back in the 1970s when I first started going to Highbury, tragically, football was a recruiting ground for the hard right and for racists. And 2 clubs, sadly, Chelsea and West Ham, really did fall to that, and they had a very hardcore racist following. To be fair, Tottenham didn't. I think Tottenham, along with Arsenal, always had a multicultural fan base. I think everyone felt comfortable going to Arsenal and Tottenham. That wasn't the same for West Ham, wasn't the same for Chelsea, certainly wasn't the same for Millwall. And you pointed out very well, I mean, this weekend against PSG, probably 4 black Londoners, not even black players, black Londoners will be part of that Arsenal team, which as a demographic is incredible in modern football. Because, players now from all over the world, the fact that we have 5 Londoners, including Declan Rice, and 4 black Londoners is something to be really proud of. And it's something I think that's also got, it's inspired this amazing feeling in London at the moment, because it really is our team. It's a London team. But I should add that Arsenal is very popular in Africa. I think, for instance, though, in South Africa, I know Manchester United is very popular. If you go to Indonesia, everyone supports Man United. If you go to Thailand, everyone supports Liverpool. If you go to South Korea, everyone supports Tottenham for various reasons. So I don't think it's necessarily a global thing. Arsenal, for the reasons I've just said, I think it's been popular in Africa. As Arno pointed out, Kanu was an amazing acquisition, such a popular player. So I think that's something Arsenal can build on, and we're going to see it this weekend.
Homegrown players, and by the way, that brings us to their rivals on the title holders in the Champions League, Paris Saint-Germain. They're a team, of course, we had Lionel Messi, we had Neymar, we had these big-name stars that came from everywhere. The squad that Paris will field again this coming Saturday, it's got quite a few players who are from the Paris area.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a combination now. I think the best acquisition that Paris Saint-Germain did was Luis Enrique. That has made the whole difference. He is the coach, and he transformed all these players. But if you now look at the players they bought afterwards, it was not for those gigantic sums like they did for Messi or for Neymar or all those players. But if you look at a player like Vitinha, it's not that he came for free, or João Neves. It was a lot of money, 60, 70 million euros involved every time. But what they did very cleverly is that they started really building a team. The dream, I think, of the owners from Qatar is to have a real Paris-based team. That's why Ousmane Dembele is now for them really the poster boy that he has become, because he is French. First of all, that helped for them already a lot, and they hope to continue building on that as much as they can. Is it already enough? I don't think for them, because if you look we talk about London, but Paris is always we always talking about Paris as the biggest place where you can find where's most of the football talent in whole Europe. So they are there, but they're not going yet to Paris Saint-Germain, or they're not good enough. That's possible as well.
Yeah. You mentioned the two biggest names, arguably, seeking in that quest for a back-to-back Champions League trophies. The Golden Ball winner, Ousmane Dembele, and Luis Enrique, a manager who's been given free rein to deploy his brand of total football. Players are conscious of this clash in styles of play. You heard Anu earlier referencing the fact that Arsenal are all about those set pieces. That didn't go unnoticed on the players.
I've been watching Arsenal, and it's incredible how they play their corners. They do it very well. Set pieces are one of their strengths, and we're going to try to manage them as best as we can to avoid conceding goals.
Congratulations to them, because it's tough to win in the Premier League. A league title is never easy to win, but for us it doesn't change anything in terms of our preparation.
Andres Evagora?
Well, first, my in-law Normandy family won't forgive me if I don't point out that Ousmane Dembele is from Normandy. He's not from Paris.
Okay.
Désiré Doué is not from Paris. Warren Zaïre-Emery is from the Paris region. But Ruben's exactly right. Paris is the biggest producer of top footballers in the world after Sao Paulo, which is an incredible achievement. And we see them everywhere. We're playing in England, in Spain, in Italy. But until now, not enough have played for PSG. The obvious exception is Kylian Mbappe, who comes from Bondy, just north of the Paris capital, as does William Saliba of Arsenal. Actually, they went to school together. They're from the same small town, just north of Paris. So I think you're absolutely right. The next step is to go from getting the great French players, which they have, and I applaud it. I think it's great to watch a young PSG.
I mean, some of those French players are not from the Paris area, but they've been through the youth program of Paris Saint-Germain, like a lot of Arsenal's players have come through the youth
PSG, program. You've got someone like Doué, who's a fantastic player who went through Rennes. You've got Warren Zaïre-Emery, who's Paris through and through. To be fair, Zaïre-Emery, Dembele's done the tour of Germany, Spain before coming back to Paris. And there are French players. Mbaye is a fantastic player coming through who is from the Paris region. So if Paris can, and this is not new, they've been thinking about doing this for decades really. If they can really tap into that talent in and around Paris, they will, I think, go to that next level. But I agree with Ruben. Since the big stars have left, PSG have gone to another level. They're a team now instead of just individuals, and they're favourites to win the Champions League for me.
All right, Paris traffic could not keep her away. Tandu Sabia, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
What do these two teams represent for you, Arsenal and Paris Saint-Germain?
A beautiful history of Spanish tactics and football, considering where the coaches come from. In the taxi, I was actually looking up the story of both coaches and their respective football careers, both former midfielders. And so we can see it in their style of play that they apply in their tactics, but also just the signings and the decisions that they've made. So looking at PSG, last year my focus in the build-up to their victory of the Champions League, was mainly around the recruitment project that they started in 2023. Luis Enrique arriving in 2023. That same year, Ousmane Dembélé coming in from Barcelona. And that was the reason that he didn't renew his contract at Barcelona and went to PSG, was because he was informed of a sporting project that was in place. We saw the build-up and what it did, and them getting their first Champions League victory. So same thing on the other side. Looking at Arteta, his took a lot longer, signing in 2019 with Arsenal, a project that went on for a good 6-7 years, you can say, until he finally won the Premiership title and now getting to the final of the Champions League. It took a very long time. Also,
Yeah, the management's got to be patient.
Yeah, you definitely have to be patient, but he's also a good student of football, considering his journey. He was at La Masia throughout his youth career, played alongside the likes of Pep Guardiola, even being his assistant coach back in the days. So you can tell that this is a man who understands football so well. And we can see in what he's built together with the current Arsenal squad right now.
Now, Tando, you're sitting next to a Dutchman, so I'm going to ask Ruben, do Paris Saint-Germain play a version of what Johan Cruyff would have called total football?
To say the same thing.
The famous, I think that a lot of us saw the famous video of Thierry Henry explaining it, bringing it back to Rinus Michels. Well, you can say that what the most important thing of Luis Enrique is that he really transformed the players into proper team players. I remember Kvaratskhelia playing for Napoli, complete different player to what he is right now. The key image of PSG winning last year that final is Kvaratskhelia at 4-0 up, running back and winning a ball. Well, he shouldn't care less, and he went for it. And that's because Luis Enrique manages to make the whole team work together. So in that case, we can call it total football, but let's say modern total football because it's a bit different though.
So Anu Adire, last year's final. Finals are usually drab affairs. Last year was a blowout. Inter Milan got thumped by Paris Saint-Germain. This year, which style is better suited for a victory? Both teams are very, as the panel said, very professional. Is it the clinical play of Arsenal or the speedy youth of Paris Saint-Germain?
Listen, I'm obviously biased, right? And last year, when Inter lost 5-0, they basically just ran out of steam in that final. You know, they were competing on pretty much all fronts towards the end of the season. They ended up not winning anything, if I remember correctly. And they ran out of steam. And they were a much older team compared to PSG, who can run rings around you, who can run circles around you. This year's finals, famous, hopefully not famous last words, will not be the same. I don't see a world where Arsenal get beat 5-0. I don't even see a world where Arsenal get beat. PSG are favorites. They are, by the very nature of being defending champions, should be favorites. They've had massive help from playing in the French league, which is not as competitive as the Premier League. They could afford to rest as many players as they want. They come into this final in very good nick. But I expect a really tight game. I expect a compact game. It will be very interesting to see what Mikel Arteta does with some of the crucial decisions he has to make. There's question marks on who does he start in midfield between our captain, Martin Odegaard, or Eberechi Eze, who is more of a maverick. There's questions at left back. Do you start Calafiori, who is more expansive, or do you start Piero Hincapié, who is more defensive? There's all these questions also in attack, Gyökeres or Havertz. So I think we'll have a sense of what Mikel Arteta is thinking when we see the team sheet about an hour before kickoff on Saturday. But I expect a compact game. The PSG players there were talking about how good Arsenal are at set pieces. People on the outside can rubbish Arsenal's set piece prowess, but it's a thing that footballers, are well aware of. Harry Maguire of Manchester United was saying a few weeks ago about how when they came to the Emirates, although they beat us 3-2, they were dreading just how good Arsenal are on set pieces. Those deliveries from Saka and Rice so flat into the 6-yard area. So, it will be a tight game. It will be about who can hold their nerve. Kvaratskhelia is such a great player that it will cause us worries. But ultimately, I see Arsenal, nicking a victory on Saturday.
As you can hear, tends to be completely impartial there, Anu. Objectively speaking, how do you see it?
I like that he mentioned set pieces because that's also something that observers have seen PSG build up from their set pieces, where Safanov's throw-ins are just as important as every other pass on the pitch. So when you look at where he distributes the ball into, and this was seen after the first leg of the semi-finals against Bayern, he distributes very over the halfway line,
This
as
is the
close
Russian
as he
goalie.
can. Exactly, as close as he can to the outside line. And so that then, when they start with their set piece, builds up from there, very fast-paced short passes, and they're already in the opposition's half. And so when we're speaking about set pieces, yes, Arsenal might be dangerous, but I do think that pay attention on Saturday to how PSG do their set pieces, especially starting from the goal kicks. It starts with Safanov, and the build-up is from there. Kvara is actually equally as key, but I really think we should see how PSG operate when they're off the ball as well. And I do think that this is what makes them so incredible. I mean, speaking of the different styles of play, you want to come in there?
No.
Okay.
I'm listening.
Yeah, like speaking of the different styles, what we've seen, especially considering the comparison between Arsenal and PSG in the semi-finals, it was a goal bonanza when we're looking at the way PSG plays. They go forward, they shoot as much as they can, versus Arsenal, who seem to have been giving us a more defensive masterclass. You see at how they organize themselves at the back. Even looking at Lewis Skelly, he's in the midfield position. But prior to that, he was more defensive. He was in the left-back position. And he only started training, I saw in an interview that he did with Ian Wright, that he started training from December to April for that midfield position. So what you find is that Arteta has recruited players that he knows are versatile in their style of play. And so that can get into the mind of the opposition as well, because you might be expecting him to be taking this position, and then we come back to the total football. Every player is a defender and every player is an attacker. And you do it differently in the modern style. And then I would really like to get into Arteta's mind, but I guess we'll see that on Saturday, to see what he puts together, because we've seen some beautiful defensive play, but also on the other hand, PSG have been magnificent to watch.
So both sides with deep benches, Andreas Evagora, lots of options. And again, for people who don't follow football closely, what a difference between the age of the chip and charge. This is today's football is so carefully studied at every level.
Well, it's another reason Arsenal are really disliked is that Arsenal are very data-driven. And the reason Arsenal concentrate on corners and free kicks is because they play against teams with a very low block. So if that's the case, the best way to get through that low block is to make the most of set pieces. I think set pieces are over-exaggerated for the simple reason PSG will stop Arsenal getting set pieces. I mean, PSG are that good, they just won't give Arsenal any corners. I don't think they'll give anything away.
You don't sound as optimistic as Anu.
Well, I've seen really a lot of PSG this year, and they're worryingly good. I mean, you've got to be honest. If you look at the attack, Arsenal don't have a single attacker who would get in the PSG side. I mean, let's be honest about this. The reason Arteta is defensive is he doesn't have the forwards. Even Saka wouldn't get in the PSG side. So he has to use his strengths. He's got Saliba and Gabriel, who indeed are, I think, the best centre-backs in the world. He's managed to get the team over the line. It's 90 minutes, to use the cliche. Anything can happen in 90 minutes. I'm really hoping it's baking hot in Budapest, because I'm hoping this PSG side will just run themselves into the ground with this fast football you're talking about. And as Anu says, maybe in the last couple of minutes we can nick a goal.
All right, one tournament concludes Saturday in Budapest. Another starts 2 weeks from today in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. The latest there on the build-up to the World Cup, well, on Tuesday, the Attorney Generals of the states of New York and New Jersey, which hosts the final, serving FIFA with subpoenas over the use of, quote, variable pricing models that send ticket prices soaring for most matches. We've had this enthralling discussion, Ruben Slachter, about football over the last hour. And now we're talking about alleged corruption. Are you looking forward to the World Cup, or do you think that Saturday's Champions League final is as good as it's going to get?
Yeah, Saturday's final is as good as it's going to get because you have the two best teams in Europe playing each other. So yeah, we're very much looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to the football part of the World Cup because a World Cup remains a World Cup. And
even when there's 48 teams and you have too many matches.
48 teams is a very, very, very bad idea because we will have 3 weeks of very boring games with lots of teams who will just be gambling for being the best third team in it. But then the tournament will start and then we'll have the knockouts and then you can turn on your television and you will have fantastic games.
So it'll all happen. Yeah, because you're going to have a situation, Tando Sabia, where you can finish third in your pool and still qualify for the next round. Is this the undoing of football? Have they taken it too far?
I guess it depends for who. For some of the sides who have been excluded because of so many other reasons, especially when we're looking at the CAF dispensation and them getting more representation, I do think that it does allow for an opportunity for the expansion of football. I do see that we have some kind of gravitation in attention, in talent, in development on the African continent. And so perhaps not this year, but I do think that is something to look out for. If you're going to be watching the World Cup and you want to see which games you should be looking at, go watch your Senegal, go watch your South Africa, because I do think that there's something brewing there. You see how much money has been invested into the academies, infrastructure, even just the tournament overall itself. I do think that there's something cooking. It's not the death of football, it's the rebirth.
It's the rebirth. And also, Andreas Evagora, remember with the Champions League, you did have that period where they tried having two round-robin tournaments. They tried having... At one point, they realized they'd gone too far, too many matches.
Yes.
Well, the same thing happened at the international level. Is this maybe will be a tournament perhaps that will bring us back to the more authentic? Again, I use that word.
We're in uncharted territory. It's really hard to say. If you are South Africa, if you're Curacao, if you're Haiti, if you're Uzbekistan, the list can go on and on. For these countries, it's amazing that they have the chance to participate. And they've qualified through their own merit. I mean, sorry to tell Arne this, Nigeria haven't qualified. Whereas, some players with, I know it's not a scoop to you, but, Cape Verde have. So, these countries have got their on merit and we have to applaud them. I think there'll be a lot of games where teams, as Ruben says, they won't really have to win. What does that mean? There might be cases where teams might play their reserves. So we're not in a situation where if you're in the top two, you go through, and if you're not, you're out, which is what we've always been used to. Going back to the way you open this particular part of the program, I mean, should we really be surprised that Americans are trying to get the most out of this World Cup financially? There's 3 hosts, and they're all in it for completely different reasons. Mexico is in it because it's a football country. Enough said. Canada is there to develop the grassroots of the game, to develop football in a country where it's not enormously popular. The USA are there to make money, let's be honest, and that's what they're trying to do.
Just trying to make money, including with surge pricing on public transportation to the matches. Anu Adeoye, are you going to watch the World Cup? What do you think, for instance, when they're announcing an American football-style halftime show for the final?
Listen, I mean, I think that felt inevitable the moment the World Cup went to America, that there will be a halftime show. I've never been less interested in the World Cup. It's not because Nigeria didn't qualify. We didn't qualify in 2022. It was still a really good tournament to watch. I watched 2006, the World Cup in Germany. But there's just something about this World Cup that's not been particularly interesting. Maybe it's because Arsenal are still in all the tournaments, so I haven't been able to shift my focus. But having a World Cup in 3 countries, it's sprawling. It's never happened before to have a World Cup in 3 countries. There's 48 teams. Nigeria somehow managed to not qualify with 48 opportunities.
Neither did Italy, if that's a consolation.
I know, so I think there's just something about this World Cup that hasn't sunk in for me just yet. I think maybe there's an element of the fact that the time zone makes it really uncomfortable to catch most of the games if you're in Europe or in Africa. So I don't know. I'm hoping I catch the World Cup bug at some point, but right now, it's still not something that I've found particularly exciting yet. And compared to previous tournaments, for example, the people would be excited, but you can't divorce this World Cup from the politics of it. There's so many countries who they're on travel bans from the US. I was reading a story yesterday of a midfielder from Haiti who is the only home-based player who is still waiting for his visa to join his teammates in America. So there's all of these issues that means that the football has always been political, right? But I think now more than ever, there's question marks about hosting this World Cup in the US, and I think those are things that have made it a bit difficult for a lot of people to really get excited about the World Cup yet.
Ruben Slachter, is the Orange Army, the football fans from the Netherlands, are they excited?
And I have to admit, with a lot of that has been said just before, I think that there's a lot of there's no orange fever, which is often the case right now. What I heard is that there will be around 5,000 Dutch fans still there, which is a lot more than Qatar. But still, 5,000 if you compare to Germany.
Or to 1994 when...
it's not the same. It's clearly not the same. Strangely enough, because you were mentioning Curaçao, I have to say it because it's very strong related to the Netherlands. I have the impression that Dutch people are more behind Curaçao than behind the Netherlands right now. So it's that team is making a lot of good friends right now.
All right, we're out of time. I can't let you all go without just a match prediction. What's going to be the score on Saturday? You heard Anu saying he's still thinking about Saturday, so let's finish with that. What's the score on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm very afraid, but I'm happy that he's far away, but it will be 2-0 for PSG.
2-0 for PSG. Tando?
2-1 for PSG.
2-1 for PSG. Andreas?
I'm going to change my mind. Arsenal on penalties.
Okay. Anu?
1-0 to Arsenal, 90th minute winner.
Okay, so it's a hung jury on this one. I want to thank you, Anu, for being with us from London. I want to thank as well Tando Sabia, Ruben Slachter, Andreas Evagora. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.